Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Steven Sparrow, and this is Berlin Today. Let's get straight to tonight's top stories, beginning with a growing dispute inside the Ministry of Justice. Justice Minister Klaus Dietrich has named Leo Schultz to replace the outgoing Dirk Hardman as leading state secretary, calling him his principal advisor on the courts and on judicial policy. Dietrich also appointed Schultz to the Imperial Supreme Court, saying his authority as Minister of Justice and Chief Justice allows him to do so. The move has drawn immediate opposition from General State Attorney Konrad Mueller, who says his office has found no evidence that Schultz has any previous legal experience to warrant his appointment and that he also lacks any legal authority to oversee prosecutorial matters. As a result, the Attorney General's office says it will recognize only directives issued directly by the Minister of Justice and will not consider orders issued solely by the new leading state secretary to be binding. Mueller says the decision is intended to protect the independence of the Imperial Prosecution Service, warning that if his objections are ignored, he will, in his own words, put my foot down. For more on this, we go to the Minister of Justice himself, Klaus Dietrich, for comment.
The activities of the General State Attorney, particularly with regards to my leading state secretary and some other actions that were taken for the past week, are currently under investigation by the Justice Ministry. This will be handled to the extent that the law permits it.
Our next story, a dramatic trial by combat unfolded during last week's Summer Hall Summit after a petition before the Emperor escalated into a deadly duel. As the proceedings drew to a close, His Imperial Majesty invited any final petitions from those assembled. Stepping forward, Legate Johann Rudel sought not favor, but justice. Before the assembly, Rudel accused the GSD director, Finn Doss, of murdering Hans Mueller, the acting head of the War Courts and Rudel's own protege. Rudel claimed Mueller was last seen alive in Doss's custody before vanishing without a trace. After conducting his own investigation, which Rudel claimed included him being forcibly removed from the Ministry of the Interior building while demanding answers, has left him with no option other than to declare one man responsible. Summoned before the Emperor, Doss answered the accusations, but failed to satisfy the throne. Judging that words alone could no longer determine the truth, the Emperor decreed that honor itself would decide the matter in a duel to the death. Steel daggers were drawn. At the Emperor's command, the two men charged across the grounds of Summer Hall. Moments later, the duel was over. Johann Rudel stood alone, while Finn Doss lay dead at his feet, bringing Rudel's quest for justice to a bloody conclusion. Moving on, the CDBK's office has announced a series of senior government appointments, resulting in a major cabinet reshuffle. Effective immediately, Wilhelm Birken has been appointed Minister of Science. Gunnar Stallman has been relieved of his duties as Minister of Finance, with Hans Homburg taking over the position. Following his appointment as commander of the Luftwaffe, General Major Roland Krachmann has been named Minister of Aviation. And in a significant expansion of authority, Grand Admiral Erdogan Voss has been appointed Special Commissioner of the Western Territories. This appointment grants him broad powers to govern Britain's occupation and other Western territories, including the authority to issue decrees, provided they do not conflict with imperial law or directives from higher authorities. We wish all these gentlemen great luck in their newly appointed positions. Now let's take a little break and go to Victor Mannheim with the weather. Victor, what's it looking like out there?
Hi, Steven. I would like to say it's hot as fuck outside from Sunday to Saturday. Why don't you go fuck yourself? Back to you, Steven.
Thank you, Victor. Much appreciated. In other news, a confrontation between two branches of the Empire has ended in bloodshed following the creation of an armed Forest Ranger Corps. The dispute began after a decree issued by the hand of the Emperor dissolved the Imperial Forest Service and created the new Imperial Conservation Commission under the leadership of Count Albert Royce. The decree granted the commission responsibility for managing the Crownswood, Imperial forests and parks, hunting regulations, and wildlife conservation. In the weeks that followed, Royce established a corps of forest rangers tasked with protecting the Crownswood. The Rangers reportedly carried rifles and wore military-style camouflage uniforms, which the Count says were licensed by the military. The Ministry of the Interior condemned the organization, accusing Royce of creating an unauthorized police force. General der NSB Sheldon Cooper went further, declaring the Forest Rangers a terrorist organization and stating that anyone identifying as a member would be considered, quote, an enemy of the party and therefore an enemy of the state, end quote. The Rangers were subsequently arrested and executed, with reports alleging that some were hung from trees while others were thrown off rooftops. As the operation unfolded, Count Royce publicly challenged the accusation, asking, "Am I a terrorist, Herr Cooper?" Cooper responded only, "For your own sake, I am not giving a public comment on that count." The incident has raised serious questions over the limits of the Conservation Commission's authority. In other news, a joint agreement between the Ouroboros Foundation, the Ministry of Science, and the Ministry of Procurements has formally revised the Empire's policy on experimental weaponry. Following earlier restrictions prompted by repeated violations, the FG-42 and MG-42 remain under strict government control. However, the Ministry of Procurements has now been authorized to resume sales of both weapons, but only to personnel and organizations specifically approved by the Ministry of Science. Procurements officials will also be required to maintain detailed records of all MG-42 sales. As part of the agreement, 3 manufacturing factories will be transferred from the Ministry of Procurements to the Ministry of Science to support continued weapons research and development. Officials also announced updated pricing, with the FG-42 now set at 15,000 Deutschmarks and the MG-42 at a whopping 320,000 Deutschmarks. Authorities say the new arrangement is intended to balance tighter oversight of experimental weapons with continued military advancement, emphasizing that access will remain limited to approved personnel in service of the Empire. We believe that this resumed approval to sell these experimental weapons at these newly updated prices has something to do with the next story. A stunning announcement at the Summer Hall Conference has sent ministries across the Empire into emergency mode after the Emperor accused multiple government ministries of failing to pay their required contributions to the Crown's federal budget allotment. Addressing ministers and senior officials, the Emperor declared the ministries had not been paying the Crown's share of the federal budget for months, and that they were all now in debt, stating that a combined total of 7 million Deutschmarks must be repaid in full. The Emperor has given the ministries 7 days from the conclusion of the Summer Hall Summit to settle the debt. Officials were warned that failure to meet the deadline would result in severe consequences. In response, ministries have reportedly entered emergency budget discussions, scrambling to identify funding, reduce expenditures, and raise the required sum before the deadline expires. With the countdown now underway, officials across the imperial government are facing mounting pressure as they race to avoid what could become one of the most significant financial crises in recent imperial history. For more on this, we go to the Minister of Procurements, Oscar Major.
I think our only concern should be the war effort and ensuring that our Emperor has been paid back due to our failures to administrate and run the government properly. Ave. Ave.
That's it for this episode of Berlin Today. Thank you so much for joining us. I am your host, Steven Sparrow. See you next time.